Christmas tore our family apart. What we unwrapped wasn't joy, but a Pandora's box of hidden truths. As laughter echoed hollowly around the tree, I clutched the evidence of betrayal that would shatter our facades, finally armed with their secrets, but wondering, was this triumph worth the ruin? Christmas has always wrapped itself in tinsel and deceit, a masquerade of expected joy. Last year, when I chose freedom over farce and skipped our family gatherings, I believed I could slip away unnoticed. Instead, they unleashed a storm of accusations, painting me as the ungrateful anomaly. Social media turned into a courtroom, their texts a relentless hailstorm of blame. I stood accused, defenses crumbling under the weight of fabricated tales. But now, gripping these revelations, a trove of their hypocrisy, I feel a dangerous tremor beneath my fingertips. It's like holding a secret pressed with power, vibrating with the pulse of a truth that could shatter their facade. Where once I was the outcast, now I possess the means to expose the game they've played. In this twisted festivity of family ties, I'm left wondering which darkness is darker, their lies, or my desire for retribution. The cold light of Christmas morning filters through my curtains, casting long shadows across the floor. I sit up, my heart already a heavy drumbeat of anxiety. The air in my apartment is sharply still, carrying an unexpected fragility, as if the day holds its breath for my decision. I stretch my fingers, knowing that beyond these walls, my family gathers in a familiar, chaotic rhythm, laughter, chime of forks, the harmony of voices all masking the undercurrents of tension. I had made my choice last night, but doubt perches relentlessly on my shoulder this morning. Their voices swirl in my mind, last year's pre-recorded arguments echoing in memory, each word imprinted with disapproval and dismissive tones. Mom's sharp sigh of frustration, Dad's grumbled dismissals. Would staying away this time be any easier than enduring it in person? The silence around me answers only in echoes. My phone buzzes, a message. It's from Clara, my sister, the family's peacekeeper. Just checking if I'm on my way. I let the screen dim, unanswered. My resolve flickers, but the idea of slipping into their routine, trapping myself in smiles that don't reach the eyes. I can't. Not today. In the quiet of my apartment, the absence of family chatter feels both liberating and ominous, as if the silence itself bears witness to my defiance. I breathe deeply, running a hand through my hair, feeling the tension ease even as unease curls deeper in my chest. I've never skipped the day before. Christmas morning was always sacred, wrapped in obligations and expectations I never questioned. Now, my decision unfurls like rebellion, both exhilarating and terrifying. I wander to the small, makeshift tree I set up in the living room. Soft, twinkling lights blink back at me, a different kind of warmth, this one self-made, unshared, intentionally solitary. There's something empowering in defining this space, shaping it as my own celebration. Yes, they might never understand, might never forgive, but it's time I listen to myself, my needs, over their projections of who I should be. I move to the kitchen, pouring coffee, the aroma curling comfortingly around me. A piece of my own making. I lean against the counter, sip slowly, savoring the taste, the sensation of freedom mingled with the bitterness of absence. This self-made celebration wraps itself around me, cinematic, almost surreal, like a scene from a movie I never thought I'd live. Outside, the world continues its holiday hum. My phone vibrates sporadically, each silence in between stretching taut with implications yet unspoken. I think of how I will face them tomorrow or the next day. There will be repercussions, that much is certain. The air outside trembles with the anticipation of unspoken confrontations. But for now, my own company is all I need. I glance at my phone once more, ignoring it, choosing the soft embrace of nonconformity. Today, I celebrate a new tradition, greeting an unsettling freedom that tastes of courage and unshackled hope. My phone was relentless, vibrating with an insistence that felt like an invasion of my peace. Each buzz resonated as a tiny explosion in my pocket, a constant reminder that their anger, like a hive of disturbed bees, was coming for me. I hadn't known how quickly words could transform from something warm and tender to something jagged and cruel. I slid my finger across the screen, unlocking a barrage of hateful messages. They cascaded down the display in a torrent of blame and vitriol, a digital deluge that made my heart race and my palms sweat. Every message was a mirror reflecting them back at me. Aunt Janice's endless accusations, Uncle Rick's capitalized fury, my mother's passive-aggressive barbs. The screen burned my eyes with an unspoken demand for my remorse, my obedience. Have you lost your mind? One text sneered at me in bold, aggressive letters, as if the shouting originated from just beyond my perception. I could almost picture their faces, twisted in outrage, as they poured their disapproval into the tiny device in my hands. I felt their disappointment as a physical weight, pressing on my chest, making it hard to breathe. My thumb hovered over the reply button, tempted to explain, to justify, to make peace. But what peace could exist in words that had already turned from whisper to scream? In their world, I had committed the unspeakable. I had spoken my truth, and in doing so shattered the fragile illusion they clung to. The notifications rattled and clattered like a chain. My hand shook as I scrolled through the messages, Father's stern rebuke, blaming me for the storm my revelation had unleashed. "You need to fix this," he demanded, as if I were to erase or rewind the confession that had cracked their polished facade. The room felt smaller with every beep, every vibration echoing like a pulse in my eardrums. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, to silence the digital screams, but I knew it would only delay the inevitable confrontation. My family's fortress of denial had been breached, and the backlash was as ferocious as it was expected. "Look what you've done." A message dug in deeper, barbed with years of tension that now found their voice. These words, their once lulling compliance, became a chorus of contempt I couldn't unhear. It was an overwhelming waterfall, dragging at the edges of my resolve and pulling me under. I leaned against the wall, the coldness of it grounding me as the virtual storm raged on. My phone vibrated one last time, but I couldn't bring myself to look again. I knew what waited there, a family's judgment, unread and undeniable. The air felt thick, laced with a tension that seemed to fill every space I occupied. In that moment, beneath the sheen of sweat and the noise of familial fury, a fragile resolve bubbled to the surface. I wouldn't, be the balm for their guilt nor the scapegoat for their shame. Not anymore. As if guided by some unseen hand, I found myself staring at the glowing screen in the dim light of the study. The air was heavy with the musty scent of forgotten books and dust, but the curvature of my spine against the worn leather chair felt like a whisper of comfort. The digital realm had always been the family's domain, a private tapestry of emails and messages that swam in secret codes. I'd never dared breach this territory until now. My fingers hesitated, poised above the keyboard, the clatter of each keystroke echoing in my pounding chest. Access was pathetically straightforward, perhaps a testament to their carelessness, or their utter lack of imagination in safeguarding their sanctum. Password granted, the floodgates cracked open. What spilled out was staggering. Line after line, life bites spilling out into cruel clarity. Conversations, unfiltered and venomous, painted a tapestry of jabs and judgment. I felt each whispered betrayal sink, an arrow edged with the sting of familiarity. Words, cold, calculated, and eerily casual. These weren't the words of strangers, they were the same voices softened by holiday dinners, drained by lame jokes, now turned into sharpened knives. Rifling through what felt like forbidden archives, I whispered aloud, needing to hear my own voice in this cacophony of online detritus. Their words, vicious whispers typed in private, aligned perfectly with my buried fears. Snippets of brutal assessment, my choices, my life, the haunting shadows of what I believed were mere figments of insecurity forced into the stark light of reality. The steady tick of the clock was incongruent background music, a persistent reminder that time was still moving as my world stood momentarily still. A part of me felt small, a child caught snooping in corners where I wasn't meant to stray. Another part, however, was rising from the wreckage of this sudden revelation, exhilarated by the power clenched in my shaking hands, proof of hypocrisy laid bare, a sordid treasure chest. The knowledge held a fierce heat, a pulse that beckoned contemplation of confrontation. Yet the scene shifted before me, morphing the room's quietude into something else, an arena where I could finally wrestle my haunting shadows with these damning truths. The imagined scene played out behind my eyes, intoxicating in its potential. Moments later, the screen blinked rhythmically, an indecipherable language speaking directly to a primal part of me, one that understood both the terrible power and burden now before me. The family dynamic had subtly shifted with each moment I spent locked in what was now mine to hold, to wield. The door behind creaked ever so slightly, and the sudden reminder of the world outside snapped me back. My pulse was a wild drumbeat, an electric symphony coursing through my veins. The final moment of clarity before my next step, I clambered off the chair, document saved, resolve anchored. I knew then I could no longer remain silent. I could hear their voices, not from happy family dinners but from endless cycles of blame, demanding justice from the shadowed confines of my mind. The room is quiet, too quiet, but inside my head, it's chaos. I sit on the edge of my bed, my phone resting on the blanket beside me. Each ring echoes like a countdown to something catastrophic. I haven't hit dial yet, but the temptation, it's there, whispering. I close my eyes, trying to bring some clarity, but all I see is a parade of faces, all wearing expressions of ignorant innocence. Their hypocrisy rises like bile in my throat, bitter and accusing. How can they stand to look at themselves in the mirror every day? The question is a persistent drumbeat in my skull, syncing with my racing heart. I imagine calling them out. Just once, letting everything pour out like a flood, awakening them from their self-imposed dreams of virtue. But I feel shackled, chained by bonds thicker than blood. There's love here, buried beneath resentment, threatening to anchor me deeper. What if? I wonder, letting the forbidden thoughts rise. Revealing their hypocrisy might be a revelation or a riot, a cleansing rain or a destructive storm. I imagine my voice, finally breaking free, summoning all the pain and turning it into power. Yet, the fear wraps around me, squeezing until I can hardly breathe. I lean back against the pillows, the ceiling staring blankly down at me as if mocking my indecision. Retaliation, what a loaded word. It dangles just out of reach, promising a fleeting moment of satisfaction. But what's next? In the quiet aftermath, when the dust settles, what do I find? It's that vision of solitude, of standing among the ruins, alone, that halts me. My mind flickers back to family gatherings, the ones tinged with a sense of charade. Laughter laced with tension, hugs that never quite melted the chill. Their voices, those voices I grew up trusting, now lie tinged with the metallic taste of betrayal. Justice demands revelation, my heart argues, turning coldly logical. It weighs on me heavily, this choice between fighting for acknowledgement and hoping, perhaps naively, for peace. I roll over to stare at the phone again, its silence now a thunderous presence. I hear my own voice in my head, strong and clear. Once you say it, you can't take it back. An image flashes, my mother, tears quietly trailing down as she pleads for understanding. The thought alone sends a shiver through me, instilling doubt where decision should lie. Is holding on to familial ties worth the price of silence? The guilt churns inside me, a relentless tide pulling at the shores of my resolve. Closing my eyes again, I wish for strength or forgiveness, whatever comes first to break this static hell. The phone feels heavy as I lift it, finger hovering above the screen, trembling slightly. Silence stretches long and uncertain, waiting for me to choose between retribution and a fragile semblance of peace. The moment felt dense, as if the air itself carried the weight of what I was about to do. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, trembling slightly, and I could feel the soft tap-tap of my pulse in my temples, like some erratic drummer trying to maintain tempo in spite of clashing cymbals. Days ago, that conversation played on a loop in my mind, a cacophony of voices, a symphony of accusations drowned in a sea of old resentment and unspoken hurts. Each echo was a reminder of how passive I had been, sitting there like a ghost at my own family table, smiling when expected, nodding when necessary. But now, something in me had shifted, like tectonic plates grumbling beneath quiet earth. I wasn't just preparing to hit send, it felt like launching a torpedo toward the fortress of everything I once cherished and feared. To confront the family meant more than just airing grievances or demanding answers. It was the declaration of a new era, fueled by the energy of all the swallowed arguments that had sat, bitter, in the pit of my belly. The house was quiet, holding its breath as if each object within sensed the change in the wind, the ominous still before a storm. The screen's glow lit my face, casting shadows over features hardened by determination. It was cathartic, a rebellion against the tyranny of silence I'd imposed upon myself, a betrayal of complicity with secrets kept and promises unspoken. What happens if I just walk away? The question escaped before I could catch it, my voice a stranger in the stillness, a traitor to my resolve. But the answer came as swiftly, firm and unyielding. I knew I wouldn't survive the lingering shadow of doubt if I stayed silent. There was power in claiming this space, in deciding that the family narrative would no longer carry the weight without acknowledging the cracks. I drew in a breath, deliberate and measured, the sound like an anchor in the silence. The cursor blinked with maddening patience, taunting yet urging. I could almost hear the imagined conversation, accusations flaring, defensive walls snapping up like steel, but also a possibility, however slight, of understanding, of fractures healing under the pressure of honesty. Hesitation washed over me like a wave, chilling my bones before receding to reveal the hard-won truth. I was ready to face the backlash, the drawn-out sighs, the storm of recriminations. Ready to see who dared follow as the foundation shifted beneath their feet. With one final exhalation, my finger descended, swift, decisive. As the machine whirred to confirm its action, a strange calm settled over me, a stillness that spoke of strength found through resolve. Resistance might await, but the lifelong silence had been broken. The path unfurled ahead, uncertain but necessary, inviting me to tread it with the conviction that this was no longer me against them, but me becoming unapologetically, irrevocably myself. The laptop screen flickered, casting an uneven glow across my dimly lit room. Faces appeared one by one. Dad with his perpetual frown, Mom's tense smile, my sister furrowing her brows in anticipation. The familiar Skype ringtone was a siren beginning the showdown. There was no turning back now. As the last face joined, the one that always completed the picture of our so-called unity, a charged silence stretched as tight as a bowstring. I could almost taste the tension, metallic and sharp. I shifted in my seat, the cold wood of the chair pressing hard against my back, grounding me in the moment. And then, like the crack of a starter pistol, it began. Voices tumbled over one another, a cacophony of demands and defenses, each trying to claim space, to exert dominance. They volleyed questions that pelted like hail. How can you do this to us? Why now? We raised you better than this. Each word spoken in half-yelling, desperate to be heard over the rising tide of familial chaos. Their once practiced lines of parental authority now jagged, fraying threats. I stayed silent, letting their accusations hang in the air, letting them feel the weight of their own words. The cursor blinked impatiently, matching the frantic beat of my heart. Mom's voice pierced through the tumult, sharp and brittle. This family has been good to you. That was my cue. I'm not sure good is the word, I said, my voice startlingly calm in contrast to the storm raging on the screen. My truth sat heavily on my tongue, hot like lava eager to spill over. I could hear their breathing drop, stutter as they recalibrated, momentarily stunned into silence, into listening. I took a breath, feeling it expand my chest, feeling the truth unfurl inside me. You remember that summer? The one when everything was supposed to be perfect. Their eyes gleamed with caution, caught between the past we shared and the revelation I was about to lay at their feet. While you were thinking about winning lawn games and Sunday picnics, I paused, letting the words grow taut with the drama of unspoken history. I was learning how secrets can suffocate. My sister glanced away, covering her mouth with trembling fingers. Dad's furrow deepened, and he suddenly seemed smaller, swallowed by the boxy confines of his office walls. Silence, heavy and pregnant, settled over us. The quiet stretched like a rubber band, ready to snap. In that brief pause, something shifted. The family picture, with its forced jollity and indirect lighting, fell. I watched as their carefully curated facades cracked, exposing the raw, unflinching reality of us, messily human, painfully flawed. I closed my eyes for a moment, anchoring myself in the newfound lightness. The string was cut, and truth had become a blade that sliced through our performative bonds. A reset in the familial balance, indeed. The room felt small, impossibly smaller than it had ever been. Every eye in the room was sharp like glass shards, some slicing, others reflective, but all tearing through the brittle membrane of our once unspoken truths. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, an incongruously mundane detail amidst the rubble of what had just been said. No one moved at first. The air hung heavy, steeped in the scent of stale coffee and shock. I could smell the disappointment, bitter and sharp, like something burning at the back of my throat. It filled the void between us. My mother's face was a mask of fury. Red splotches crept up her neck, coloring the streaks of gray that ran through her hair. Her hand trembled on the table, fingers curling around the edges as if she might flip it over, turn the entire horrific tableau on its head. How could you? She finally spat out, her voice cracking like dry kindling. Next to her, my father remained silent, his hands folded, the muscles in his jaw twitching with every unresolved tension. He wouldn't look at me, focusing instead on a point just above my shoulder. I could see the memories flickering through his mind's eye, moments that had been innocuous until now, all tainted under the white-hot light of truth. My brother, always the pragmatic one, merely shook his head, as though clearing away a persistent mosquito. This isn't the time to destroy what's left of us, he muttered, leaning back in his chair, his knuckles pressed firmly against his temples like he was trying to suppress something no one else could see or hear. Silence again, thick and undeniable. I knew by the way my sister's gaze darted to the window, tracing the water stains on the ceiling, that she had known or at least suspected. Her denial was quiet, woven into the rhythms of everyday life, but it was there, insidious and ever-present. I cleared my throat, a sound that seemed to echo in this mausoleum of family unity, and it felt like coughing up shards of glass. It's out there now, I said, more to dispel the stillness than anything else. Pretending doesn't make it not true. My mother shot up from her chair, sending it clattering across the floor. Her eyes were hard. I need air, she choked, her voice rebounding off the walls as she stormed out, the screen door slamming dully behind her. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if it was better when the secret lived, malignant yet intact. My father finally looked at me, his gaze filled with something I couldn't quite name, a tangled web of losses wrapped in a single tear that dared not fall. The room now a hushed vacuum, stagnant with raw wounds. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. A breath heavy with the understanding that nothing would ever truly return to how it was before. We were all actors frozen mid-performance, caught in the painful recognition of our own cursory betrayals. The fires had died down, leaving only embers of hurt and, perhaps, a spark of understanding, an offering I considered silently. I sat alone in the dim light of the living room, the faint hum of traffic outside mingling with the tangled thoughts in my head. This room, once echoing with the harsh slice of angry words, now hung heavy with an unfamiliar quiet. It was the kind of silence that demanded acknowledgement of pain, asked me to sit with it, and tend it like a reluctant guest. I traced patterns on the arm of the sofa, fabric worn by years of what life had passed through here, so many stories imbued into the fibers that I could almost hear them. My fingers paused, pressing against a particular spot where years ago I had frayed it with nervous picking during one of those long, difficult talks that seemed almost ritualistic in their hopeless loops. A soft creak from the hallway broke the spell. It was her, hovering in the doorway, unsure and fragile as if she might crumble under the weight of her liminal step back into this room. Her eyes met mine, a mix of distant history and fresh pain. In the slight narrowing of her gaze, I saw a mirror of my own expression and felt the tug of some raw, unspoken past. I could make us some tea, she suggested, her voice a fragile whisp trying to braid the frayed threads between us. Tea was always her bridge, her peace offering. I nodded. Words felt tasteless, insufficient. As the kettle began to groan and whistle, the surreal normalcy of the scene wove itself into the air between us. I watched her move, deliberate, measured, combining water and leaves in the ritual motion of two people trying to decode each other's silence. She brought over the mugs, her hands steady but eyes flickering, probing the edge of this tentative truce. Steam curled lazily upward, streaming into nothingness, whispers of what could be a new beginning or another end. We both sipped carefully, the warmth of the ceramic grounding me in the moment, both a comfort and a reminder. No more fires, I said finally, placing my cup down with a resolve that was tender yet firm. It wasn't a declaration of peace, nor of war, just a naming of reality, a statement of recognition. She looked at me with an intensity that rippled beneath the surface calm of her face. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of tears, but they didn't spill over, swollen but held at bay by the thin skin of restraint she wore so tightly. We've scorched enough of us, she breathed out, her hands clutching the mug as if it held the only warmth she could trust. In that simple exchange, I felt the tremor of something old and weary giving way to the possibility of something unnamed. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever fully. But it was a space where forgiveness might consider coming home to if it chose. And in that offering, I found a bittersweet kind of triumph, threads of understanding whispered into the quiet, tethering us to this tenuous here and now. The air feels different, lighter almost, as I linger by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. There's a softness to its retreat, a gentle surrender to the night, much like the one settling over my heart. Finally, a quietude, the kind I didn't believe I was capable of finding again, after everything. I lean on the frame, fingertips brushing cool glass, and I let out a heavy breath I've been holding for years. I think about family, the word so simple, yet so profound. It used to only mean those who share your blood, the ones who are supposed to know you best, maybe love you unconditionally. But somewhere along the way, it became a battlefield strewn with words that cut deeper than any weapon, actions that fractured trust like brittle bone. So much anger, so much hurt, all swirling in an endless cycle. But maybe family isn't just who we're born to. Maybe it's who pauses to understand when the truth, however painful, finally stands in light. I feel the truth in my bones now, as deeply anchored as my sorrow once was. I've faced it, faced them, all the shadows of my family, and in doing so, found a path through the woods to some kind of peace. There's a clarity that comes with acceptance, not forgiving in a way that absolves, but in a way that releases. I think that's what I've done. Released them, released myself. Walking through the house, I glance at the photos standing tall on the mantel. Black frames and frozen smiles, memories trapped in time. I used to combust with envy staring at their angles, at the happiness that felt out of reach. But memories are only pieces of a whole story, snapshots of moments we might never fully understand. As I look at them now, I don't feel a tidal wave of grief. Just a quiet acceptance, like a gentle sigh. My phone buzzes on the table, and I see a message from Sarah, the friend who became family, the one who stood by when everything was falling apart. A simple invitation, coffee tomorrow. I type back a quick yes, the ease of the connection soothing some of the rougher edges inside me. Blood might dictate relations, but it's the choices we make, the people we let in, that define family. A slow smile spreads across my face as I think about the future. The past will always be a part of me, another layer to the person I am becoming, but it doesn't have to define everything. I step away from the window, leaving the silence of the evening behind. I open the door and step into the night, with something that feels surprisingly like hope fluttering in my chest. The darkness is still there, but it's threaded with a lightness the likes of which I haven't felt in years. Embracing it feels brave, and so very necessary. Inhale. Exhale. Forward.